Hi, my name is Alamadi and I'm the CEO of Ibda, a cybersecurity consultancy firm in the United Arab Emirates. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of the event for giving me the opportunity to speak and be part of this amazing event. Secondly, I would like to thank you for joining us and being virtually with us today. Today I'll be talking about cybersecurity in the age of COVID-19. We have seen recently that due to the pandemic that we have been facing around the world, things have changed even in the cyber world. We have a huge impact when it comes to the cyber world and cyber attacks and the attack trends, because since this started and a lot of organizations and a lot of individuals were not ready for this pandemic, it had affected the way we live and the way we work. We started being very dependent, even more than before, on technology. Many organizations, almost majority of the organizations around the world, started working remotely. We saw a huge increase in cyber attacks when things started, and they have been manipulating a lot of individuals when it comes to actually tricking them into making certain mistakes to make sure that the attacks are successful. There has been so many different breaches on certain levels, from governments to private companies. And of course, us being more dependent on the technologies have opened more doors to even more risks when it comes to cyber attacks. We see that organizations are still not ready. A lot of organizations are still behind when it comes to cybersecurity. They started providing the technology for people to work remotely, but when it comes to ensuring security while working remotely, a lot of people were not ready. They didn't have the right tools. Their staff were not educated. So in the UAE, we started a huge campaign across the country trying to educate users that things are a little bit different when you're working from home. You need to keep in mind that the attacks are increasing. People thought that everybody's focusing on the COVID-19 virus itself. Hackers, these are normal individuals, thought that hackers don't care about attacking organizations anymore, not thinking that this is a great opportunity for these attackers to start and even trick users in a different way and use different techniques to ensure that people are actually tricked and provide them the information that they need, or make the mistakes that make the attack successful. All the numbers that you see on the screen, and there are many statistics, show this increase, and many organizations have been facing so many issues globally when it comes to cyber attacks. But there has been certain government initiatives in certain countries, and certain entities have been taking certain steps to make sure that they are doing better and getting into a new normal that is also secure, because working remotely is not going away. Even with today, for example, in the UAE, a lot of entities have gone back to work, but they are making a lot of exceptions in terms of certain parents need to still work remotely because their kids are having remote learning, and many such exceptions. The biggest problem that we saw as well, that there has been a lot of exceptions in terms of working remotely, and that allowed a lot of scams to happen as well. So we saw that there has been a huge increase in terms of social engineering scams because people started working remotely. People were not educating. All the cybersecurity professionals were focusing on other things. They forgot that the awareness is still a key element, that we still need to educate users about the risks that are out there. So we saw a new trend of social engineering attacks and scams online, where people were receiving different emails, different SMS, and phone calls, and a lot of different communication tools were used as before to scam users, but with new scenarios that are more relevant. And of course, everybody's talking about the pandemic, so they decided to use the pandemic as the scenario to actually ensure that their attacks are successful. When it comes to the phishing scams, I'm sure it's the same even in India. There has been a lot of phishing scams going around, and we have seen a lot of organizations, be it public or private, have been really facing issues, and there were successful attacks. People are clicking on links because the scenarios that you use were quite tricky in terms of telling people that click on this link because if you click on this link, you will see the latest list of COVID-19 patients, for example, in the UAE, and people were clicking on the link. They were curious. They wanted to know information about the vaccine. Like the example, as you see on the screen, they were pretending to be World Health Organization, telling people about the updates that are coming. They knew that people will click because people are interested. This is what is happening at the moment. This is the biggest concern. The other scenarios that they used that became very common as well, and we saw huge attacks because of that, is that they pretended to be from the IT department or the security team, trying to trick people to click on links by telling them that we want to ensure security while working remotely, so please click on this link to ensure that you're downloading the latest updates, or enter your credentials to ensure that we enroll you in a certain security program. A lot of these kind of things and scams have been used to ensure that people actually install certain malware, malicious code on their machines, or provide their credentials. So this has been going on, and we have been trying to educate everybody that be careful, do not click on these links. And I have been working on this for a while now. I started my career actually doing these sessions and doing a lot of training and education. And it's a shame that until today, there are individuals who are not at that level of awareness, and they are still not even aware about the basics of security and best practices. We started talking about remote working so much because it became the new normal. People are working from home, people started working from different remote sites, and the question that was asked by so many users, unfortunately it was not answered on time. There was a delay in telling people how to work securely. Then later on, people started starting these awareness programs to educate people, but it came a little bit late. And during that period from March, when in the UAE, we started the lockdown from March to April and May, we saw a lot of attacks. And then by June and July, people started being a little bit more aware. But of course, still there are so many targeted attacks happening, even in the UAE. We started educating people about having a dedicated workspace. Unfortunately, we saw so many mistakes because people just didn't think. People thought that it's okay to take company devices with them. Suddenly, overnight, everybody's asked to work from home. Now we had two cases, either work from home using their individual devices, which was even more dangerous because we didn't know what are the security settings on these devices and if they are aware how to protect these devices or not. And we had another group where they actually rushed into providing laptops to the devices for their employees to work from home without guiding them the right way to do it. And people ignored physical security at home. People would keep their laptops in the UAE. It's very hot, in the heat, in the dust, without thinking that this can actually damage the devices. Some departments asked to take their files with them home, like the human resources or people who work still with some papers and contracts. And unfortunately, there was a lot of data loss as well, because people didn't think that the kids might damage these files, or if they had some pets at home, they might damage the files. So they didn't think of it from that perspective, and that had some impact on some of the organizations. So that's the first thing we tell users: prepare a dedicated workspace. If you don't have an office, at least have somewhere secure at your home that you can show. You can lock the file so nobody has access to it in a locked cabinet. Put the devices in somewhere that is protected from heat, from the kids, and all of the other aspects. Another thing that became very normal suddenly, people sharing information from work with their families and friends. They are actually working from home, having these conference calls, and I even saw it at home here in my own house, and I started telling my family, don't do that. They are doing conference calls and having meetings remotely, and the whole family members are sitting around and listening, forgetting that these people are not authorized to hear such information. A lot of confidential information might have been leaked. Yes, there is a trust with the family, but then again, are they authorized or not? That's a different question. So we really need to think and live security. And if we don't think about these small things, I know the family members will not steal the information, but they might share that information with some friends and then other friends and then other friends, and that might reach someone who might have some bad intentions. Of course, email has been the most common communication tool in the past. It became even more used during these days because we try to avoid having face-to-face meetings. We didn't want to have any social gatherings or any meetings in the office, so we wanted to maintain the social distancing, so email was even more used for communication. But still the mistakes are there. A lot of confidential data was sent in clear text over email without any encryption. Unfortunately, most of the organizations do not have the guidelines and the tools for their users that how to send any confidential data across, even if you're using email to encrypt it or use any other tools, that is sent in a secure manner. And the other shocking part for me was that until today, majority of the entities do not have any secure portal or any way that you can upload large files and send it in a secure way over a secure connection to another person who's authorized to see that information. The use of personal email became very common for work, and this is of course not acceptable, but people thought it's normal. Now that I'm working from home, let me use my personal email to work, to send work information, and that is of course not correct. So there are a lot of things that we try to educate people when it comes to that aspect, but unfortunately a lot of people just didn't pay attention to that. Another thing that became common is people working from home connecting through their Wi-Fi. None of the organization, and I didn't see that even online, that came later on, educating people on how to secure their Wi-Fi. People forget, us as security professionals, we tend to forget that people at home are not tech savvy. They don't understand the security best practices, so their Wi-Fi's might be open, there might not be even any password or encryption or nothing used on their Wi-Fi. And a lot of entities didn't even give a VPN because there were license issues, there were a lot of issues that they didn't even give a VPN client for their employees to connect securely. So we had a lot of issues there as well, that people, and after opening up as well, so we had a lockdown for a period, and then people were allowed to go out, and now things are normal, people go out and all, but still we say maintain the social distancing. But people still go to restaurants, some people work in cafes and connect to open public Wi-Fi's. And again, in terms of awareness, a lot of people were not aware about the dangers of connecting to an untrusted Wi-Fi connection and sending information that is confidential in clear text. We go to the basics, and this is what surprises me so much, that until today, and I have done thousands of sessions across the country, I have done even sessions outside in India and other countries as well, and I still see that some people are not even aware about the basics. People are still sharing their digital identity, people are still sharing their passwords, and the common thing that I've seen with the remote working and with the current pandemic situation, people think it's okay to share their device credentials with their family members because they are at home. Maybe their kid wants to use the laptop or something for work or remote learning or whatever, and they give them the credentials. They think it's fine. The use of two-factor or multi-factor authentication is still not common, and that is very easy to implement. And most of the excuses that I have heard from organizations, oh, it's annoying, people don't like it, our staff will complain. So this is something that I've seen a lot of people are still not following, using default passwords, not implementing password security policy from a technical perspective on your systems. So these are the basics that anybody can do, but still we are missing that. So we need to educate people, and we really need to provide the tools to make sure that people can actually follow these best practices and stop sharing their identities with their colleagues, with their family members, all of that, whatever it's common and causes a lot of data leakage. We started using collaboration tools. We didn't have that in the past. It was not that common. In the UAE, we rarely had any, let's say, remote meetings. Every meeting was happening face-to-face. We used to go and visit our customers and sit with them and talk and elaborate and talk about something confidential, not confidential. It didn't matter, but we always had physical meetings. Now that we are using these collaboration tools, a lot of people forgot that these collaboration tools might have certain vulnerabilities and weaknesses. People didn't even think, I mean, people are using Zoom, Microsoft Teams, so many of them. There were a lot of security features, and more were introduced later on, because this became more common depending on these organizations, depending on these collaboration tools. So we were telling all these organizations, have you thought about the security of these tools before using them? Most of them said, no, we just needed it. It was urgent. Have you educated your people not to click on links? Or we have this common thing happening now. A lot of organizations are sending invitations or to emails to many users and telling them join these webinars, and a lot of these entities are not trusted. These organizations who pretend that they are doing webinars, they might send links and ask the users to click on it, and that might have some kind of negative impact and install a malware or something like that. So a lot of these things, people are not even locking the meetings. I've seen whoever has the link can click and come in. Disabling file transfer, enabling waiting rooms. There are so many security settings that you can put from IT perspective, and then educate the users. They have some security settings and settings that they can use as organizers of the meeting as well, to ensure that there is no data leaked. And for example, not allowing recording. We saw a lot of recordings happening in many meetings that confidential information was discussed. And a lot of people found out later on that the person who joined have recorded the session, or the host recorded the session without telling them. So that created a lot of issues between vendors and organizations, and vice versa. Another thing that we saw that is even more common now than before, people creating groups on WhatsApp in the organizations and starting to share information on work information over WhatsApp, because it's so easy on social media to share information. We are so used to WhatsApp. So they are WhatsApping these files without thinking. And all the people say, yeah, but that's secure, it's encrypted. It doesn't matter. This is not a platform that is owned by your organization. We tell them, and in the UAE, for example, there are laws that prevent governments from putting their information on a cloud that is outside the UAE. So you cannot host your government information outside UAE without permission. And a lot of people are just sharing these confidential files over WhatsApp or without thinking. And they don't use the proper channels, maybe because the organization did not provide it. So we need to really think, and the information classification became even more important than before, that educate your users, tell them about this, and tell them what is allowed to be shared through these platforms and what it's not allowed to be shared through these platforms, using different kind of technologies that are online. And third-party applications are, of course, always not recommended if you don't have control over it. Yes, we saw organizations giving so many exceptions. We had two cases. The organizations that provided laptops to their users gave them a lot of exceptions. They allowed them to use removable media because it was much easier. IT didn't have time to help them. They allowed them to install software without guidance. All these exceptions are very dangerous. Basically, you're breaching your own security policies without thinking. And yes, it will make their life easier in terms of operations, but security is hugely impacted when you do such mistakes. And then there was another group of entities, many organizations, where they allowed their users to just use their own devices. Have you educated, and this is the question that you need to ask yourself, have you educated your staff? Are my staff at a certain level of maturity when it comes to awareness that I can allow them to use their machines? Do I have the right controls in place? Have I educated them about updating and patching their operating systems and devices regularly? Have I told them what is the trusted antivirus? Maybe I give them an antivirus to install on their machines. Have I told them about backup if they are storing work information on certain devices? Do I have mobile device management? Do I have mobile application management solutions? do I have all these controls to see what is happening outside my organization and how are they dealing and exchanging with organization data? Unfortunately, majority of the organizations did not ask that question, and we had so much data leakage happening because of that. So make sure that I would rather the employee sit idle, not work until I prepare and get the budget for those devices, for the laptops, so that he can work remotely, then give him the laptop, continue working, but continue working unsecurely. So that was a debate that we had, operations versus security. Of course, you have to think about security more. A lot of organizations didn't even have the policies and procedures in place. And maybe the pandemic was a wake-up call for a lot of organizations that, are you ready for security? Have you ever thought about working remotely? Because anything can happen. Disasters can happen all the time. And maybe it's not all global. Maybe it's something that happens within your organization. Are you ready for that? A lot of people started talking about business continuity as well in the country. And I was happy about that people are really thinking now about worst case scenario, thinking about what can happen in terms of availability and in terms of security continuity as well. So we started guiding a lot of entities, and a lot of entities started drafting policies and procedures, giving the guidelines and ensuring that their staff are really compliant with such regulations or, let's say, policy statements while working remotely as well. So this is something that you must have, because you cannot educate every single user. It's difficult. You have new employees every time. They need to have a reference. People forget. You have to think that your staff don't know anything. Have the basics documented as well. Let them read, let them educate themselves, and keep reminding themselves how to follow security best practices. Finally, reporting incidents. Reporting incidents and security weaknesses were important before, but now even more important than before, because people are sitting at home facing a lot of issues, and if they don't directly talk to your IT help desk or talk to any team that you have put in place to do incident handling and take these calls, they will not know, because a lot of things might be happening outside the network or the infrastructure of your organization, and you might not be aware of it, and that might cause a lot of huge impact in terms of your reputation, financial, or any other way that depending on the attack, of course. So make sure that you have the lines established. Educate people, put a certain dedicated line, make it 24 hours. That's even more preferred. Put the right tools for monitoring as well, so you can have better detection, and of course that can prevent a lot of attacks. So yes, we are living in a different world now. Things are different. We are working remotely, and the way we used to think about security has to change as well. From if you are a normal user or an IT specialist or a security specialist, things have changed, and we have to change our mentality in terms of the way we exchange information and deal with information, and the way we do things online as well. So we have to be even extra careful and more vigilant and more careful on what we do and all the activities that we do while working, or on a personal level as well, to protect our personal information. I would like to thank you so much for tuning in and listening to my presentation, and wish you all good health and stay safe. Thank you very much.